What if everything we thought we knew about Atlantis was wrong? For more than 2,000 years, the legend of this magnificent sunken city has captivated dreamers, scholars, and explorers alike. We've been told it was a myth, a cautionary tale invented by the philosopher Plato to warn against pride and ambition. Generations have searched for it in vain, sifting through ancient texts and diving into deep ocean trenches, only to come up empty-handed. But today, that story is changing in ways nobody could have predicted. Startling new evidence has emerged, challenging long-held assumptions and forcing historians and archaeologists to rethink one of humanity's greatest mysteries. This isn't just another fringe theory or hopeful speculation. It's a paradigm shift grounded in tangible discoveries that defy conventional explanation. Imagine a civilization so advanced, so breathtakingly sophisticated, that its sudden disappearance left behind only whispers and fragments, a place where wisdom and technology flourished long before what we consider the dawn of history. That's the promise of Atlantis, a story that tugs at something deep within us, the longing for lost worlds, for forgotten knowledge, for proof that humanity's past is even more extraordinary than we ever realized. For centuries, this tale has been dismissed as allegory, a beautiful fiction with no basis in reality. But now, cutting-edge research and unexpected findings are painting a very different picture. From geological surveys to deciphered ancient records, the pieces are coming together in a way that suggests we may have been looking in the wrong places, asking the wrong questions all along. This video is your invitation to join that investigation, to step into a world of mystery, science, and revelation. We're going to explore groundbreaking discoveries that have sent shockwaves through academic circles, examine theories that connect Atlantis to real historical events, and walk through the evidence that's turning skepticism into serious consideration. You'll see why some of the brightest minds in archaeology and geology are now willing to entertain the possibility that Atlantis wasn't just a legend. It was a reality, one whose story has been waiting, patient and silent, for us to finally listen. So settle in and open your mind, because what you're about to witness could change everything you thought you knew about our ancient past. To truly understand the weight of these new discoveries, we must first return to the original source, the very bedrock of this entire mystery, the works of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. It's in his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, written around 360 BCE, that we find the only detailed account of Atlantis. And it's crucial to remember that Plato wasn't some spinner of fables. He was one of history's most influential thinkers, a man dedicated to reason, ethics, and the pursuit of truth. He presents the story not as a whimsical myth, but as a factual history, a tale passed down to his ancestor, the Athenian statesman Solon, by Egyptian priests in the city of Sais. These priests allegedly chided the Greeks for having forgotten their own ancient past, telling Solon that their records preserved the memory of a great cataclysm that had swallowed a mighty rival power. Plato's description is remarkably precise and vivid. He locates Atlantis as a vast island empire, larger than ancient Libya and Asia Minor combined, situated in the ocean beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we know today as the Strait of Gibraltar. This places it squarely in the Atlantic Ocean. He paints a picture of an astonishingly advanced and prosperous civilization. The capital city was a marvel of engineering, built on a hill and surrounded by concentric rings of water and land, connected by great canals and bridges. The walls were plated with precious metals like brass, tin, and the mysterious red metal orichalcum, which gleamed like fire. The city was filled with magnificent temples, palaces, harbors teeming with ships, and even a massive racetrack. But Atlantis was more than just rich. It was powerful and politically sophisticated. Plato describes a structured society with a confederation of 10 kings who governed various parts of the empire, meeting periodically to discuss law and judgment. Initially, its people were noble, embodying divine principles and living in harmony. However, over generations, their human nature eroded their virtue. As Plato writes, the divine portion of their souls began to fade away, becoming diluted too often and too much with the mortal admixture. They became obsessed with greed, power, and conquest. They grew arrogant and launched a failed military campaign to conquer the entire Mediterranean, only to be repelled by the brave and virtuous Athenians, the ideal state in Plato's view. It was this moral decay that led to their downfall. The gods, displeased by their corruption, decided to punish them, and the punishment was swift and absolute. Plato's account delivers one of the most dramatic lines in all of ancient literature. There occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea. This wasn't a slow erosion or a gradual sinking. It was a sudden, violent, and catastrophic event that erased a superpower from the map in under 24 hours, leaving behind only impassable mud shoals that blocked any future travel to that part of the ocean. For centuries, scholars have debated this account. Was it pure allegory, a fictional tale crafted by Plato to illustrate his philosophical ideas about the ideal state and the dangers of hubris? Or was it a genuine historical tradition, a distorted memory of a real event that humanity somehow preserved? The allegorical interpretation has long been the dominant one in academic circles, dismissing Atlantis as a useful story, not a real place. But the incredible specificity of Plato's details, the geography, the architecture, the political structure, the precise timeline of its destruction, has always nagged at the curious mind. It feels less like a vague parable and more like a report, and it is this very specificity that modern researchers are now using as a roadmap, comparing Plato's ancient words to real-world geology and archaeology with shocking results. So where exactly does one begin to search for a lost empire? For many modern investigators, the hunt didn't start in the misty Atlantic, but much closer to Plato's own world in the sparkling waters of the Aegean Sea. This brings us to one of the most compelling and long-standing theories, the idea that the memory of Atlantis is actually the memory of the Minoan civilization and its catastrophic demise during the volcanic eruption of Thera, the island we now call Santorini. The parallels are, at first glance, almost uncanny. The Minoans, based on the island of Crete, were a truly extraordinary Bronze Age society. They were the first great civilization of Europe, flourishing from roughly 3000 to 1400 BC, centuries before the rise of classical Greece. Their sprawling palace complexes, like the famous one at Knossos, were architectural marvels, multi-storied, labyrinthine structures with advanced plumbing, light wells, and vibrant frescoes depicting bull-leaping ceremonies and graceful dolphins. They were a seafaring power with a vast trade network that stretched across the Mediterranean from Egypt to Anatolia. They were peaceful, artistic, and profoundly sophisticated, a near-perfect match for Plato's description of a powerful, advanced island empire. Then, around the year 1600 BC, the volcano at the heart of the nearby island of Thera exploded in one of the most violent geological events in human history. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Geologists believe the eruption was 4 to 5 times more powerful than the famous explosion of Krakatoa in 1883. The center of the island collapsed in on itself, instantly transforming a single mountainous island into a broken ring of land surrounding a massive, water-filled caldera. The eruption would have been a world-altering cataclysm. A colossal column of ash and pumice would have blotted out the sun for days, visible for hundreds of miles. The pyroclastic flows, superheated waves of gas and volcanic matter, would have raced across the sea at incredible speeds, instantly obliterating every settlement on Thera and searing everything in their path. But the most devastating weapon in this natural arsenal was likely the tsunami. The sudden collapse of the volcano's core into the sea would have displaced an unimaginable volume of water, triggering a mega tsunami. Computer models suggest waves initially over 100 feet high radiating outward from the caldera. Within a matter of hours, this wall of water would have slammed into the northern coast of Crete just 70 miles away. It would have scoured the coastline, utterly demolishing the Minoans' vital harbor towns, their mighty fleet of trading ships, and their coastal agricultural centers. The ashfall that followed would have buried the island in a thick layer of toxic pumice, rendering farmlands barren for a generation and leading to widespread famine. In a single day and night of misfortune, the entire foundation of Minoan power, their navy, their trade, their agriculture was smashed. Their society, though it may have clung on for a few more decades, was doomed. They became vulnerable, and within a century or so, they were overrun by the more warlike Mycenaeans from the Greek mainland. A brilliant, advanced civilization was effectively erased from history, its memory surviving only in vague Greek legends about a powerful King Minos and a labyrinthine palace. The connection seems almost too perfect, an advanced island civilization wiped out by a sudden, catastrophic geological event that sank part of its land and crippled the rest. It's a theory that elegantly provides a potential historical core for Plato's story. Proponents argue that the tale of this disaster could have been passed down through generations, perhaps carried by Egyptian traders who witnessed the ash cloud or heard reports of the devastation. Over 1,000 years, the story could have been embellished, its location shifted, and its scale magnified into the epic tale of a continent-sized empire that Plato eventually recorded. However, this seemingly perfect fit is not without its significant problems. The most glaring issue is location. Plato is exceptionally clear. Atlantis was situated beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the Atlantic Ocean. Thera is firmly inside the Mediterranean, a sea the Athenians knew intimately. It seems unlikely that such a drastic geographical error would have persisted in the story. Furthermore, the timelines don't align perfectly. The Minoan collapse happened around 1600 BC, over 1,000 years before Plato wrote his dialogues, and nearly 900 years before even his ancestor Solon would have visited Egypt. While that's enough time for a legend to grow, it's a very long time for an accurate historical record to be maintained. Finally, Thera was damaged and partially sunk, but the entire island of Crete was not swallowed by the sea. The Minoan civilization fell, but its land remained above water, inhabited by others. The Thera theory provides a powerful and scientifically grounded possible inspiration for the Atlantis myth. It shows us that the ancient world was indeed capable of experiencing the kind of sudden, apocalyptic disaster that Plato describes. It offers a tantalizing glimpse of a real, lost advanced culture whose fate feels hauntingly familiar. But the geographical and logistical inconsistencies have led many researchers to wonder if Thera was merely a dramatic echo of an even older and more profound catastrophe, a piece of a larger puzzle that we are only just beginning to assemble. Yet, just as the Thera theory began to settle into place as a compelling, though imperfect, analogy, the ground literally shifted beneath it. Recent geological investigations on Santorini itself have uncovered evidence so startling that it forces us to reconsider the very scale of the disaster, potentially bridging the gap between the known eruption and the legendary cataclysm described by Plato. For decades, the prevailing model was of a single, albeit colossal, volcanic event. But science has a way of overturning even our most established beliefs, and the latest research paints a far more terrifying and complex picture. Advanced core sampling and subterranean imaging techniques are now allowing geologists to read the island's history like a book, layer by ancient layer. These aren't just surface observations, they are deep biopsies of the Earth itself, extracting long tubes of sediment and rock that chronicle thousands of years of geological activity. What these cores have revealed is that the eruption of Thera was not one single catastrophic explosion. Instead, it was a devastating sequence of multiple, colossal eruptive phases, a series of violent outbursts that may have occurred over a much shorter and more destructive time frame than anyone had previously imagined. This changes everything. A single eruption, while horrific, is a finite event, but a cascading series of eruptions, each one building upon the devastation of the last, creates a prolonged nightmare. It suggests the initial blast and tsunami were merely the opening act. The island and the surrounding seascape would have been subjected to a prolonged assault, repeated tsunamis, ceaseless earthquakes as the magma chamber collapsed in stages, and a continuous, suffocating rain of ash and pumice that could have lasted for days or even weeks. This wasn't just a bad day, it was an extended period of absolute terror and societal obliteration that would have made any recovery impossible. This new timeline of a prolonged, multi-phase catastrophe aligns far more eerily with the specifics of Plato's account. He describes a single day and night of destruction, which has always been a point of contention. How could an entire empire vanish in 24 hours? But if the most intense period of this eruptive sequence, the climax of the volcanic fury, unfolded over that time frame, it provides a chillingly literal match. The initial volcanic paroxysm, followed by the collapse of the caldera and the generation of the mega-tsunami, could indeed have constituted that fatal period where the world literally fell apart for the Minoans. The sky would have turned black at noon, the sea would have reared up as a mountain of water, and the very earth would have shaken itself to pieces. Furthermore, this revised scale of destruction helps address one of the key weaknesses of the Thera Atlantis theory, the question of magnitude. Plato describes the sinking of a vast island. While Crete itself did not sink, this new evidence suggests the cataclysm was so immense that it could have felt, to any surviving witnesses or those hearing the tales, as if the entire world of the Minoans had been swallowed by the sea. Their empire, their influence, and their power vanished in a geological heartbeat. The memory of such an event, carried by refugees and traders, would have grown in the telling, transforming from a regional disaster into the story of a lost continent. The new geological data doesn't just support the idea of inspiration. It provides a plausible mechanism for how a real event could have been so utterly apocalyptic that its legend endured for a millennium, waiting for a philosopher to record it. This new geological timeline forces us to confront a truly sobering possibility, that the story of Atlantis may indeed be a distorted but powerful memory of a real, historically significant catastrophe. Yet for all its compelling parallels, the Minoan theory has always faced one stubborn, persistent obstacle: the profound geographical discrepancy. Plato was unequivocal in his placement of Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean. For centuries, this single detail has been the primary reason the academic world dismissed the entire notion as fantasy, as searching the depths of the open Atlantic for a sunken continent seemed the stuff of pure fiction. But what if the reason we never found anything out there was simply because we weren't looking closely enough or with the right tools? Today, we are no longer limited to ancient texts and dives in shallow waters. We have begun to scan the ocean floor itself with godlike vision, and what we are finding there is challenging every single assumption. The advent of advanced satellite altimetry and high-resolution sonar mapping has utterly revolutionized underwater archaeology. These are not just incremental improvements, they represent a quantum leap in our ability to see what lies beneath thousands of feet of water. Satellite radar, for instance, doesn't take photographs of the seafloor. Instead, it measures the precise height of the ocean's surface from space. Incredibly, the gravitational pull of massive features on the seafloor like mountains, trenches, and even large sunken structures creates tiny, measurable bumps and dips on the ocean's surface. Specialized satellites like NASA, Topex/Poseidon, and the European Space Agency's INVIS have been meticulously cataloging these minute variations, allowing scientists to create stunningly detailed topographical maps of the deep ocean bed, revealing features nobody knew were there. Simultaneously, multi-beam sonar systems towed behind research vessels paint an even more precise picture. These systems fire fan-shaped swaths of sound waves downward, meticulously measuring the time it takes for each sound pulse to bounce off the seabed and return. This data is then compiled by powerful computers to generate breathtakingly clear, three-dimensional images of the underwater world. It's like draining the ocean but without losing a single drop of water. This technology has uncovered lost river channels, ancient coastlines submerged since the last ice age, and thousands of previously unknown seamounts. And in the process, it has also begun to reveal a series of deeply puzzling anomalies, geometric shapes and formations that, to the trained eye, appear anything but natural. One of the most famous and controversial of these discoveries lies not in the Mediterranean, but precisely where Plato said it should be, in the Atlantic Ocean west of the Strait of Gibraltar. Off the western coast of Africa, near the islands of the Canaries and the Madeira archipelago, satellite and sonar maps have revealed a massive submerged plateau known as the Horseshoe Seamount. And on this plateau, at a depth of over 100 meters, sits a formation that has ignited furious debate. Dubbed the underwater pyramid of the Azores, it appears to be a near-perfect gargantuan pyramidal structure with a square base and seemingly symmetrical triangular sides. Its dimensions are staggering, reportedly rivaling the Great Pyramid of Giza. Mainstream geologists are quick to point out that angular, sharp features can be formed through intense volcanic activity and tectonic shifts, processes that are common in the geologically active Mid-Atlantic ridge. They argue that this is simply a very unusual but entirely natural basaltic formation. Yet the sheer precision of its angles and its isolated presence on an otherwise flat abyssal plain continue to fuel speculation and calls for a dedicated archaeological expedition. Perhaps even more intriguing are the findings in the waters around the island of Bimini in the Bahamas. Here, in the crystal-clear shallow waters, lies the famous Bimini Road, a long, linear formation of massive, rectangular limestone blocks arranged in a seemingly deliberate pattern that resembles a submerged roadway or a collapsed wall. Since its discovery in 1968, it has been a pilgrimage site for Atlantis seekers. Conventional geology explains it as a classic example of beak rock, a type of limestone that naturally fractures into large, block-like segments due to tidal erosion and cementation processes. They argue the perceived road is simply a fortunate but entirely random alignment of these fractured blocks. However, recent dives and more detailed surveys have revealed that the formation is far more complex than initially thought. The blocks appear to be multi-layered, resting on pillar-like stones, and the entire structure extends in patterns that suggest a larger, organized layout beyond a simple straight line. Furthermore, core samples have shown that the material composition is inconsistent with the surrounding native beak rock, hinting at the possibility that these massive stones were quarried and moved from elsewhere. The search has also turned to the Mediterranean, where technology is shedding new light on known archaeological sites and revealing entirely new ones. Off the coast of Sicily, near the island of Pantelleria, sonar surveys have mapped what appear to be the ruins of a vast submerged city at a depth of 40 meters. The images show a complex network of regular, right-angled structures that look eerily like foundations of buildings, arranged along a grid of what could be ancient streets. The depth suggests this site would have been above water during the last glacial maximum, over 12,000 years ago, a timeline that intriguingly predates the Minoans and aligns with some interpretations of Plato's chronology for Atlantis's destruction. Similarly, in the Gulf of Cambay off the west coast of India, controversial sonar images have revealed large-scale geometric patterns on the seabed. Follow-up expeditions reportedly recovered artifacts from the site, including stone tools and pottery samples, which were carbon dated to an astonishing 9,500 years old. If verified, this would point to a sophisticated, organized human society existing thousands of years earlier than current mainstream models suggest. Each of these discoveries, from the Atlantic abyss to the Mediterranean shallows, presents a profound challenge. The scientific community rightly demands rigorous scrutiny. Pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar patterns like faces in clouds or structures in rocks where none exist, is a powerful force that researchers must constantly guard against. The ocean floor is a bizarre and violent place, shaped by forces that can create formations which mimic human construction with uncanny accuracy. Volcanic activity can produce perfectly hexagonal columns, as seen at the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. Underwater landslides can arrange rocks in deceptively linear patterns. The burden of proof for a man-made origin must be exceptionally high. Yet, the sheer volume of these anomalies, scattered across the very regions associated with the Atlantis legend, is becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. We are no longer talking about a single, blurry sonar image. We are compiling a growing catalogue of architectural ghosts etched into the continental shelves. The conversation is shifting from outright dismissal to one of cautious but intense curiosity. These aren't just rocks, they are questions. Each unusual angle, each symmetrical layout, each artifact recovered from a depth that should be barren of human history, is a direct challenge to our understanding of humanity's past. They force us to ask not just if Plato's story was true, but if we have profoundly underestimated the age, the reach, and the technological capabilities of ancient seafaring cultures. The maps are being redrawn not by philosophers but by sound waves and satellites, and they are revealing a lost world we are only just beginning to comprehend. But just as sonar scans in the Atlantic present tantalizing mysteries, another theory has emerged that bypasses the ocean floor entirely, proposing that the ruins of Atlantis have been hiding in plain sight all along, not beneath the waves but in the middle of a vast desert. This is the highly controversial yet astonishingly detailed hypothesis surrounding the Richat structure in Mauritania, also known as the Eye of the Sahara. From the ground, it's a breathtaking geological oddity, a series of concentric rings carving through the arid landscape. But from space, its true form is revealed, a massive, near-perfect bull's-eye staring up from the heart of the Sahara. And when you lay Plato's description over it, the parallels become almost spine-tingling. Plato described the capital city of Atlantis as a complex of concentric rings alternating between water and land. He wrote of a central island hill surrounded by a ring of water, which was then encircled by a ring of land, then another ring of water, and finally a larger outer ring of land connected to the open ocean by a great canal. The Richat structure is not a man-made city, but its natural formation is a near-perfect mirror of this very layout. It features a central dome, followed by a smooth, circular valley that could correspond to the first inner ring of water, then a sharp, rocky ridge matching the description of the first ring of land, and so on, out to its enormous outermost diameter. And the scale is perhaps the most convincing detail. Plato stated the central island was 5 stadia in diameter, with the subsequent rings and the outer plane measuring in precise increments. 1 stadion was an ancient Greek unit of measurement, and when you apply it to the Richat, the proportions align with an accuracy that feels less like coincidence and more like a description. The entire structure measures about 23 miles across, which perfectly matches the dimensions Plato gave for the metropolitan area of the Atlantean capital. The location, however, seems at first to be the theory's greatest weakness. Plato placed Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the Atlantic Ocean, and the Richat structure is deep in the Sahara Desert, nearly 300 miles from the coast. How could a city of concentric canals be in one of the driest places on Earth? Proponents of the theory argue that this overlooks a crucial fact of our planet's climatic history. The Sahara was not always a desert, Around 12,000 years ago, during the end of the last ice age, the region was a lush green savanna, crisscrossed by rivers and lakes teeming with life. This period, known as the African Humid Period, aligns almost exactly with the time frame Plato gives for Atlantis's existence and destruction. Geological studies of the area around the Richat have confirmed the past presence of an extensive river system. Satellite imagery clearly shows the ghost of a massive ancient riverbed, the Wadi al-Kubar, running directly through the structure and flowing towards the Atlantic coast. This could be the remains of the very canal Plato described, connecting the outer rings of the city to the open ocean. The theory suggests that a cataclysmic event, perhaps a massive earthquake or a rapid shift in climate, not only destroyed the city but also dramatically altered the entire landscape, drying up the rivers and eventually burying the ruins under sand. Beyond the geography, the surrounding area offers compelling archaeological clues that point to a sophisticated, ancient presence. Scattered across the plateaus and valleys within and around the Richat are thousands of stone artifacts, sharp, precise tools, projectile points, and grinding stones. These are not random rocks, they are unmistakably the products of human technology. Furthermore, researchers have identified over 100 prominent mounds dotting the outermost ring, formations that bear a striking resemblance to eroded tells, the man-made mounds that often conceal ancient ruins in the Middle East. While formal excavation has been limited, surface finds include artifacts that some argue resemble anchors and other maritime objects, a haunting suggestion of a seafaring culture that once thrived there when the desert was a sea of grass. Of course, the mainstream geological explanation for the Richat structure is that it is a deeply eroded geologic dome, a symmetrical anticline formed by uplifted rock layers that have been worn down over millions of years. The concentric rings are simply alternating layers of resistant and less resistant rock, creating the dramatic pattern. Geologists are adamant that this is a purely natural phenomenon. Yet, even they admit the Richat is unique in its near-perfect circularity and clarity. The hypothesis does not claim the rings themselves are man-made, but rather that an ancient, advanced civilization chose to build their capital upon this striking natural formation, carving the described canals through the existing valleys and constructing their city on the rings. The cataclysm that destroyed them then eroded and buried the evidence over millennia, leaving behind only the natural foundation and scattered artifacts. This theory forces a profound reconsideration of what we mean by lost. We imagine a city sunk beneath the sea, preserved in the deep. But what if it was lost to shifting climate and encroaching sand? The Richat structure hypothesis is arguably the most comprehensive terrestrial match for Plato's account, addressing the location, size, dimensions, and even the mysterious canals with a level of detail that ocean-based searchers have struggled to achieve. It presents a vision of Atlantis not as a sunken continent, but as a lost civilization whose green, watery world turned to dust, leaving its circular heart exposed in the desert, waiting for us to see it from above and finally understand. The debate surrounding the Richat structure is a fascinating clash between established geological science and a radical reinterpretation of human history. On one side, mainstream geologists present a clear and well-supported explanation for the Eye of the Sahara. They argue that this remarkable formation is a spectacular example of a deeply eroded geologic dome, specifically a symmetrical anticline. Millions of years ago, tectonic forces pushed a blister of molten rock upwards, creating a giant dome of layered sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic rock. Over eons, the top of this dome was worn away by wind and water erosion. Because these rock layers had varying degrees of hardness, they eroded at different rates. The more resistant layers, like quartzite, formed the prominent ridges we see as rings, while the softer layers of clay and sandstone were carved out into the valleys between them. This process, while resulting in an unusually perfect circular pattern, is entirely natural and can be observed in smaller forms all over the world. The presence of volcanic rock in the center is explained by the upwelling magma that created the initial uplift, not by some ancient cataclysm. For geologists, the Richat is a beautiful and well-understood textbook example of planetary forces, not a puzzle to be solved. However, proponents of the Atlantis theory counter that while the underlying geology may be natural, it provided the perfect template for an advanced civilization to build upon. They don't claim the rings themselves are entirely man-made, but rather that a prehistoric culture saw the potential in this unique natural amphitheater and sculpted it into their capital city. The precise concentricity and scale would have been an irresistible foundation. The theory suggests that these ancient builders enhanced the natural valleys, carving them into the navigable canals described by Plato, and constructed their city on the concentric ridges. This would explain the staggering dimensions that so closely match Plato's account without requiring the impossible feat of building the entire structure from scratch. The real question then shifts from the origin of the rings to the evidence of human modification and habitation. This is where the investigation turns to the search for proof of water and human activity. The greatest obstacle to the theory is the location, a city of canals in the middle of a desert. But climate history provides a compelling answer. Extensive paleoclimatological research confirms that the Sahara underwent dramatic shifts. Between approximately 14,500 and 5,000 years ago, the region experienced the African humid period. What is now barren desert was a verdant grassland with abundant rivers, lakes, and savanna wildlife. Satellite imagery and geological surveys have indeed identified the remnants of a vast river system, including a major ancient watercourse that appears to flow directly from the Richat structure towards the Atlantic coast. This could be the geological ghost of the Great Canal Plato described, connecting the city to the ocean. A sudden and catastrophic climatic shift or a major tectonic event could have diverted these water sources and rapidly desiccated the region, leading to the city's abandonment and eventual burial under sand. This scenario transforms the location from a weakness into a strength, perfectly aligning with the narrative of a prosperous water-based culture that was destroyed by a natural disaster. The most tantalizing pieces of evidence, however, are the physical artifacts scattered across the site. While the vast scale of the Richat makes extensive excavation difficult, surface surveys have yielded intriguing finds. The area is littered with a massive number of lithic artifacts, stone tools, arrowheads, and grinding stones indicating prolonged and significant human occupation during the prehistoric era. More controversially, researchers have pointed to over 100 mysterious mound structures located primarily on the outermost ring. These mounds exhibit regular, linear arrangements that some argue resemble the foundations of large, eroded buildings, much like the tells found in Mesopotamia. Perhaps most strikingly, several examples of what appear to be worked stone have been identified, including large, sharp-angled slabs and circular stones with center holes that have been compared to ancient anchor stones, suggesting a maritime culture. Mainstream archaeology interprets these as natural geological formations or artifacts from much smaller, later nomadic groups, not a massive Bronze Age capital. Yet for those who see Atlantis in the desert, each stone tool and each oddly symmetrical mound is a whisper from a forgotten age, a clue that we are only just beginning to read the true story written in the sand. The search for proof within the Richat structure inevitably leads us from the grand scale of its rings to the small, tangible fragments left behind by those who might have once called it home. While the sweeping vistas from space capture our imagination, it is on the ground, in the dust and the scorching heat, where the most compelling whispers of the past are being found. Scattered prolifically across the plateaus and within the circular valleys of the formation is a veritable carpet of lithic or stone artifacts. These aren't just random rocks, they are the unmistakable signatures of human ingenuity. Researchers and independent investigators have documented thousands of these objects, ranging from expertly crafted projectile points and sharp, precise cutting tools to heavy grindstones known as metates used for processing grain. The sheer density of this material is the first crucial clue. It points not to a temporary campsite for nomadic hunters, but to a sustained, significant, and likely large population that lived and worked here for a very long time. The technology on display is consistent with what archaeologists term the Aterian industry, a sophisticated stone tool culture associated with prehistoric North Africa that dates back tens of thousands of years, showing a level of cognitive development and skill that goes far beyond simple survival. Perhaps even more intriguing than the scattered tools are the mysterious mounds that dot the landscape, particularly along the outermost ring of the structure. From a distance, they appear as simple hills, but a closer examination reveals their unusual regularity and arrangement. There are over 100 of these mounds, and many are aligned in straight rows and geometric patterns that feel deeply unnatural in a landscape shaped by random erosion. Their shapes are often too symmetrical, their placement too deliberate. To proponents of the Atlantis theory, these bear a striking and powerful resemblance to the ancient tells found throughout the Middle East. A tell is not a natural hill, it is a man-made mound formed by the sequential building and collapsing of mud brick structures over centuries or millennia. Each layer represents a generation, a chapter in a city's history, buried and built upon. The suggestion is that these mounds in Mauritania are not geological features at all, but the heavily eroded, sand-buried ruins of large buildings and complex structures. Without extensive archaeological excavation, their true nature remains a tantalizing mystery, but their presence offers a compelling target for future exploration that could definitively prove or disprove the theory of a major settlement. The most persistent argument against the Richat as a potential site for a water-based civilization like Atlantis has always been its current arid environment. A city of concentric canals is impossible in a desert. This objection, however, collapses entirely when we consult the deep time climate records of the Sahara. We now know with absolute certainty that the desert we see today is merely a temporary state in a cycle that has repeated itself over hundreds of thousands of years. The key period of interest is the African humid period, which began around 14,500 years ago and lasted until approximately 5,000 years ago. During this epoch, a slight shift in the Earth's orbital pattern supercharged the African monsoon, transforming the entire Sahara region. What is now the world's largest hot desert was a sprawling green savanna, a vibrant ecosystem crisscrossed by vast river systems and dotted with enormous lakes, some of which were larger than any inland water bodies existing today. The evidence for this lost world is not just theoretical, it is physically etched into the landscape and preserved in the geological record. Satellite imagery clearly reveals the ghosts of these massive water networks, showing ancient river channels and lake beds that are now filled with nothing but sand. Core samples taken from the region around the Richat structure itself have found sediments containing fossilized freshwater diatoms and lake deposits, proving that standing water was once present. One immense ancient river, now called the Wadi al-Quba, has been mapped running directly through the Richat and flowing towards the modern Atlantic coast. This could very well be the remains of the Great Canal that Plato described, connecting the outer rings of the metropolis to the open ocean. This transformative climate picture recontextualizes everything. It provides the essential environmental backdrop for a sophisticated, water-managing civilization to thrive in what is now an unimaginable location. Their world was not one of sand dunes, but of grasslands, rivers, and lakes, a perfect setting for the maritime culture described in the legend. The final, haunting question is not if people could have lived there, but what became of them. The end of the African humid period was not a slow, gentle drying. Geological evidence suggests it may have occurred in a series of rapid, severe droughts, a climatic collapse that would have been catastrophic for any settled society. The rivers that were their lifeblood would have shrunk and vanished within generations, perhaps even within a single lifetime. The green plains would have withered into dust, forcing mass migrations and causing the collapse of any complex social order. This scenario provides a scientifically plausible mechanism for a disaster that could have erased a civilization, transforming its memory into a story of a world swallowed not by the sea but by the desert. The scattered stone tools and the enigmatic mounds become the silent monuments of this collapse, the physical evidence of a thriving culture that succumbed to a changing planet, leaving behind only a circular enigma in the sand and a tale that would echo for millennia. While the theories of Thera and the Richat structure look to the Mediterranean and the Sahara, another compelling candidate emerges from the cold, turbulent waters of the North Sea. This is the story of Doggerland, a very real and now submerged landscape that was once a vast, inhabited peninsula connecting mainland Europe to Great Britain. Unlike the sudden volcanic cataclysm that may have inspired the tale, Doggerland's disappearance was a slow-motion drama spanning millennia, driven by the relentless rise of sea levels at the end of the last ice age. For thousands of years, this was no mythical realm but a thriving, accessible home for Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, a verdant plain of hills, forests, lagoons, and rivers teeming with life. Its existence is not a matter of speculation but of established science, confirmed by decades of geological core samples, seismic surveys, and the countless artifacts dredged up by North Sea trawlers, stone tools, animal bones, and even human remains. This was a lost world, not of bronze-clad kings, but of real people whose entire homeland vanished beneath the waves. The question is whether its gradual drowning could have been remembered and mythologized into the story of a single, catastrophic day and night. The process of Doggerland's inundation was indeed a protracted one, a story of creeping environmental change. As the immense ice sheets covering northern Europe melted, the sea level rose at an average rate of about 1 to 2 meters per century. This was not a smooth, gentle flooding but a fitful and relentless advance. Communities would have witnessed their familiar world slowly transforming. A favorite hunting forest would become a salt marsh, a freshwater lagoon would turn brackish, and coastal settlements would be abandoned again and again as the shoreline moved inward. Generations would have lived with this constant existential threat, a slow retreat that would have been woven into their oral histories and folklore. This gradual process seems to be the polar opposite of Plato's description of a sudden, violent submergence. However, scientists now believe this slow burn may have been punctuated by at least one catastrophic event that could have provided the dramatic climax the legend requires. The key to this lies in a specific area of Doggerland known as Dogger Bank, a large sandbank that was once the highest hill range in this lost landscape. Even as the seas rose, Dogger Bank remained an island refuge long after the surrounding plains had flooded, a final holdout for both humans and animals. Then, around 6150 BC, geological evidence points to a catastrophic trigger. A massive submarine landslide occurred off the coast of Norway known as the Storegga Slide. An enormous section of the continental shelf, roughly the size of Scotland, suddenly slid into the deep ocean abyss. This colossal displacement of water would have generated a terrifying megatsunami that raced across the North Sea. Computer simulations suggest the wave could have been up to 10 to 20 feet high when it slammed into the remaining coastlines and the last vestiges of Doggerland. For the Mesolithic people living on Dogger Bank, this would have been an apocalyptic event. A wall of water arriving without warning would have scoured their island home, devastating the population and utterly destroying any semblance of their community in a single horrifying day. This combination of factors creates a powerful new lens through which to view the Atlantis narrative. We have a sophisticated and populated territory, a veritable lost world for its inhabitants that was gradually swallowed by the sea over centuries. But its final destruction, the moment it truly ceased to be a habitable place, may have been shockingly swift and violent, courtesy of a natural disaster on an unimaginable scale. This mirrors the two-part structure of Plato's account, a great power that falls out of favor with the divine and is ultimately punished with a cataclysmic flood. The gradual rising seas could be seen as the period of divine disfavor, the slow decay of their world, while the Storiga tsunami represents the final, decisive day of punishment. The memory of such a trauma, experienced by survivors who fled to the coasts of Britain and Denmark, would have been seared into the collective consciousness. Passed down through hundreds of generations, the story of their drowned homeland could have traveled along ancient trade routes, slowly transforming from a specific historical memory into a grander, moralistic legend about an advanced culture that was wiped away by the sea. The Doggerland hypothesis offers a different kind of proof than searching for sunken marble columns. Its evidence is ecological and anthropological. The bones of land mammals like mammoths, lions, and bears dredged from the North Sea floor prove it was once dry land. The sophisticated harpoons and antler tools pulled up in fishing nets testify to a human presence. This theory doesn't require us to find a Bronze Age metropolis. It asks us to consider the profound impact of real geological events on human storytelling. It suggests that the core of the Atlantis myth may not be about a single, super-advanced civilization, but about a universal human experience, the trauma of losing our home to the water, a story that has played out on coastlines around the world for thousands of years. The legend, in this light, becomes a powerful amalgamation of many ancient floods, a shared memory of lands that are now forever under the waves. This brings us to one of the most captivating and controversial aspects of the Atlantis enigma, the possibility that its citizens wielded technology that we would consider advanced even by today's standards. Plato's account provides the initial spark for these extraordinary ideas. He didn't just describe a wealthy city, he portrayed a society operating on a completely different level of sophistication. The walls of the central citadel were plated not just with gold and silver, but with a mysterious metal called orichalcum, which he says sparkled like fire and was valued second only to gold. More intriguingly, he describes a massive temple dedicated to Poseidon at the heart of the city, which featured a roof made of ivory and was adorned with gold, silver, and this glowing orichalcum. But the most tantalizing detail is his mention of a powerful, mysterious energy source. He writes that the Atlanteans harnessed the energy of the Earth itself, drawing a primary force from the planet's core to power their civilization. For a society supposedly existing over 11,000 years ago, this is a staggering claim that pushes far beyond the simple bronze and stone tools we typically associate with ancient history. Modern interpretations of these descriptions have given rise to a host of speculative theories, the most prominent of which revolves around the use of massive energy crystals. The idea proposes that the Atlanteans mastered the piezoelectric properties of quartz and other crystalline structures, using enormous, precisely cut gems to generate, store, and transmit vast amounts of energy. Proponents of this theory suggest these crystals could have been housed in towering temples, acting as central power plants that provided limitless, clean energy for the entire metropolis. This energy might have powered everything from their intricate lighting systems to the propulsion of their ships, and could even have been weaponized for defense. The concept ties back to Plato's primary force, imagining it not as magic but as a lost science of harmonic resonance and earth energies. Some even speculate that the legendary downfall of Atlantis was caused by a cataclysmic mishap with this very technology, a tectonic feedback loop or a crystal reactor that went critical, ultimately triggering the earthquakes and floods that sank the continent. Another pervasive theory in alternative history circles suggests the Atlanteans had mastered the secrets of anti-gravity, which would explain the construction of their monumental architecture. The sheer scale of the city's design, with its massive concentric rings and colossal structures, presents a logistical nightmare for conventional archaeology. How could a prehistoric people quarry, transport, and precisely position the megaton stone blocks needed to build such a place? The anti-gravity hypothesis offers a futuristic solution that Atlantean scientists discovered how to manipulate gravitational and electromagnetic fields, effectively making heavy objects weightless and easy to maneuver. This technology would not only make construction trivial, but could also explain the advanced seafaring and aerial vessels described in some esoteric traditions. It paints a picture of a civilization that moved through land, sea, and air with an ease we are only beginning to dream of, their daily life seamlessly integrated with physics we are still struggling to understand. It is absolutely crucial, however, to separate these fascinating speculations from the established facts presented by Plato and confirmed by mainstream science. The line between extrapolation and pure fiction is often blurred in discussions of Atlantis. Mainstream historians and archaeologists rightly point out that Plato never explicitly mentions crystals, flying machines, or anti-gravity devices. His descriptions, while magnificent, are still bounded by the material world known to the ancients' precious metals, grand architecture, and advanced maritime power. The primary force could be interpreted metaphorically, perhaps referring to geothermal vents or a sophisticated understanding of hydraulics that would have been revolutionary for its time, but not necessarily supernatural. The glowing orichalcum was likely a naturally occurring alloy like brass or a specific type of polished copper ore, not a power crystal. Much of the more extreme technology attributed to Atlantis comes from later sources, notably the 19th century mystic Helena Blavatsky and the 20th century psychic Edgar Cayce, whose detailed readings about Atlanteans using lasers and energy weapons have profoundly influenced popular culture but are considered pseudoscience by the academic community. The enduring power of these advanced technology theories, despite their shaky factual foundation, speaks to a deeper human desire. Atlantis has become a blank canvas onto which we project our own technological aspirations and anxieties. In an age where we are grappling with the promises and perils of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and fusion energy, the story of a sophisticated culture that was destroyed by its own technological hubris is more resonant than ever. It serves as the ultimate cautionary tale. Whether Atlantis was real or not, the narrative forces us to ask profound questions about our own trajectory. Can a civilization develop advanced technology faster than it develops the wisdom to use it responsibly? Is progress inherently linked to a fall? The legend challenges us to consider that the greatest achievements of humanity might not lie ahead of us but behind us, lost to time and waiting to be rediscovered, not necessarily in the form of a glowing crystal, but perhaps as a warning etched in the mud and sand of our own ancient past. This geographical puzzle brings us back to the very coordinates Plato provided, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, and to one of the most intriguing modern search zones, the Azores Plateau. Rising from the depths of the mid-Atlantic, this massive submerged landmass is one of the largest plateau structures on Earth, spanning an area comparable to the entire Iberian Peninsula. Its highest points breach the ocean's surface to form the 9 volcanic islands of the Azores archipelago, but the vast majority of this territory lies beneath thousands of feet of water, a sunken world that has captivated Atlantologists for decades. The sheer scale of this underwater realm feels continental, a fitting stage for a lost empire, and its location is precisely where the ancient text said we should look. Modern seafloor mapping technology has been pivotal in revealing the plateau's secrets. Sophisticated sonar surveys conducted by research vessels and satellite altimetry have painted a stunningly detailed picture of this drowned landscape. The data reveals not a flat, featureless abyssal plain, but a complex topography of submerged mountains, vast plains, and deep, rift valleys that look eerily like the river systems of a drowned continent. These maps show terrain that would have been entirely above water during the last glacial maximum, when global sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. For thousands of years, this was not a deep ocean but a sprawling, island-dotted shelf, a potential crossroads for transatlantic travel long before recorded history. The implications are profound, suggesting a landmass vast enough to support a significant population and sophisticated culture, one that could have served as a stepping stone between the continents. Perhaps the most compelling geological feature discovered on the Azores Plateau are the hydrothermal vents, often called black smokers. These are fissures on the seafloor that eject superheated, mineral-rich water, creating towering, chimney-like structures and supporting unique ecosystems that thrive in the absolute darkness. To some researchers, these vents provide a startlingly literal match for a very specific detail in Plato's account. He described Atlantis as having hot and cold springs that provided a great utility to its people. In the context of a volcanic island chain like the Azores, this description makes perfect sense. The cold springs could be the abundant freshwater sources from rainfall and mountain aquifers found on any island, while the hot springs would be the surface manifestations of the same volcanic activity that drives the deep-sea hydrothermal vents. A civilization advanced enough to harness geothermal energy could have used these natural features for heating, bathing, and even early industrial processes, viewing them as a divine gift from the gods beneath the earth. The theory gains further traction from the unique mineral wealth associated with these volcanic systems. The hydrothermal vents are known to precipitate massive sulfide deposits rich in copper, zinc, gold, and silver, the very metals Plato described as adorning the temples and walls of Atlantis. Most intriguingly, some vents produce a rare brass-like alloy of copper and gold that possesses a distinctive fiery glow, a potential candidate for the legendary metal orichalcum that Plato said sparkled like fire. This isn't a mythical substance but a potential real-world material whose luster and rarity could have been mythologized over centuries of retelling. The presence of such mineral wealth on the plateau provides a plausible economic foundation for a powerful and wealthy maritime civilization, one that could have mastered metallurgy and trade. Skeptics, of course, offer a robust counterargument. Geologists point out that the Azores Plateau is primarily composed of basaltic oceanic crust, formed by volcanic activity along the mid-Atlantic ridge over millions of years. Its formation is a continuous, slow process, not the result of a single cataclysmic subsidence. They argue that while large parts of it were indeed above water during the ice ages, it was likely a collection of scattered islands, not a single, unified landmass of continental scale. The timeline also presents a significant challenge. The plateau would have been fully submerged by the current sea level rise around 6,000 years ago, which is still several millennia later than the 9,600 BCE date Plato gives for Atlantis's destruction. This discrepancy requires either an error in Plato's source material or a reimagining of the proposed timeline for human seafaring and complex society. Despite these scientific objections, the Azores hypothesis remains powerfully alluring because it so faithfully respects the primary source. It doesn't attempt to relocate the story to the Mediterranean or the desert. It takes Plato at his word and searches where he said the city lay. The discoveries on the plateau, its sheer size, its drowned river valleys, its volcanic resources may not constitute proof, but they create a compelling physical backdrop against which the legend could have plausibly unfolded. It transforms the story from a pure allegory into a potential historical mystery rooted in a real, tangible, and enigmatic place at the bottom of the sea, a constant reminder of how much of our own planet's history remains hidden beneath the waves. But to truly bridge the gap between a geological event and a living, breathing civilization, we must look beyond the ash layers and tsunami models and into the very heart of Minoan culture. Stepping into the reconstructed halls of the Palace of Knossos is like walking directly into Plato's description. The vibrant, life-sized frescoes that adorn their walls don't depict scenes of conquest or stern-faced gods, but a society that celebrated grace, athleticism, and a profound connection to the natural world. The most famous of these, the bull-leaping fresco, is a stunningly dynamic depiction of young acrobats somersaulting over the back of a charging bull. This is not a casual pastime. It appears to have been a central, sacred ritual, a display of incredible courage and skill that required immense training. Now compare this to Plato's account of Atlantis, where he describes a great temple complex featuring a massive racetrack and a central shrine dedicated to bull sacrifice. The parallel is uncanny. For the Minoans, the bull was a powerful sacred symbol, central to their religious and cultural identity. It is not a stretch to imagine how this unique and dramatic tradition could have been remembered and mythologized over centuries, evolving into the grand ceremonies of the Atlanteans. The architectural genius of the Minoans provides another powerful layer of evidence. Their sprawling palace complexes were not fortified castles. They were open, airy, and incredibly sophisticated centers of administration, craft, and religion. The Palace of Knossos itself was a labyrinthine structure of multiple levels, with complex drainage systems, terracotta pipes providing running water, and ingenious light wells that illuminated the interior spaces. They even had a form of flush toilet. This level of urban planning and comfort was unparalleled in the Bronze Age world and wouldn't be seen again in Europe for over 1,000 years. Plato's description of Atlantis's capital, with its concentric rings of water and land, its hot and cold springs, and its advanced hydraulic engineering, reads less like a fantasy and more like a poetic interpretation of Minoan architectural brilliance. The Minoans were master hydrologists, constructing elaborate aqueducts and drainage systems to manage their water resources. The concentric design, while not a perfect match, echoes the complex, non-linear layout of a Minoan palace, which would have seemed like a bewildering and magnificent maze to an outsider. Perhaps the most haunting parallel lies in the artifacts left behind. Excavations at Akrotiri, the Minoan-style settlement on Thera that was buried by the volcano's initial pumice fall, provide a breathtakingly well-preserved snapshot of a society frozen in time. Here we find no evidence of panic or war. The buildings are intact, the beautiful frescoes still on the walls, and precious objects left behind as if the inhabitants had just stepped out. This paints a picture of a sudden, unexpected catastrophe that arrived with little warning, exactly as Plato described. Furthermore, the Minoans were a thalassocracy, a seafaring empire. Their power and wealth were built on their massive fleet of ships, which facilitated a vast trade network that stretched from Egypt to Sardinia. They traded exquisite pottery, saffron, olive oil, and metalwork, bringing back exotic goods and ideas. This aligns perfectly with Plato's account of Atlantis as a naval power that ruled over other islands and engaged in widespread commerce from its base on a great island. The sudden destruction of their fleet by the Thera tsunami would have been a catastrophic blow from which they could never recover, instantly vaporizing their source of power and prosperity. The cultural case is compelling because it moves from the how of their destruction to the who they were. It suggests that the memory of the Minoans, their vibrant art, their unique bull-centric rituals, their astonishingly advanced and peaceful cities, and their sudden, mysterious disappearance left a deep scar on the consciousness of the ancient world. The story of this magnificent island culture, wiped out in a single cataclysmic event, could have been carried by Egyptian traders who witnessed the ash cloud darken the sky for days. It could have been passed down through generations, slowly merging with other flood myths and evolving in scale and detail. Over 1,000 years, the impressive island of Crete and its satellite Thera could have grown in the telling into the continent-sized empire of Atlantis, its precise location blurred by time. The Minoan hypothesis provides a believable cultural and historical nucleus for the legend, a real people whose remarkable story was so powerful, so tragic, that it refused to be forgotten, demanding a philosopher's pen to ensure its immortality. While the search for Atlantis has taken us from the volcanic caldera of Thera to the circular heart of the Sahara, one of the most enduring and publicly accessible mysteries lies just off the coast of North Bimini in the crystal-clear, turquoise waters of the Bahamas. This is the Bimini Road, a mysterious formation of massive, rectangular limestone blocks arranged in a compelling, long linear pattern that has fueled debate and captured imagination since its discovery in 1968. To the untrained eye, it looks unmistakably man-made, a paved highway or perhaps the collapsed wall of some ancient structure, now resting in about 18 feet of water. Its discovery sent a shockwave through the world of alternative history, as it seemed to offer the first tangible, photographic evidence of a lost civilization precisely in the part of the world where many hoped to find clues about Atlantis. The initial discovery was made by two divers, Jacques Mayol and Robert Angove, but it was the famous trance medium Edgar Cayce who had eerily prophesied its existence decades earlier. Cayce, in a reading given in 1933, had stated that a portion of the temples of Atlantis would be discovered near Bimini in 1968 or 69. He specifically mentioned that it would be found under the slime of ages of seawater and would appear as a portion of the temple where the records are kept. For his followers, the timing and location of the discovery were nothing short of miraculous confirmation, transforming the Bimini Road from a curious geological feature into potential holy ground and a beacon for Atlantis seekers from around the globe. The conventional geological explanation, however, offers a far less mystical but equally fascinating origin story. Geologists classify the blocks as a prime example of naturally formed beach-rock. Beach-rock is a type of sandstone that forms in the intertidal zone in tropical climates. As seawater saturated with calcium carbonate washes over loose sediments and shell fragments, the carbonate acts as a natural cement, binding the grains together into a solid mass. Over time, as sea levels rise or the coastline shifts, this cemented layer can become submerged. The key characteristic of beach-rock is that it naturally fractures along straight, right-angled lines due to its internal jointing system, a process similar to the way mud cracks as it dries, but on a much larger scale. This natural fracturing can create blocks that appear remarkably geometric and deliberately placed. Proponents of this theory point out that identical formations can be found all over the Bahamas and the Caribbean. The Bimini Road is simply the largest and most photogenic example, its isolation on a flat sandy bottom making it appear more significant than its cousins closer to shore. Yet, for those who argue for a human origin, the Bimini Road possesses several features that defy simple geological explanation. The formation is not a single, straight line of rocks. More detailed surveys have revealed that it forms a distinctive J shape, with a second parallel line of blocks running alongside a portion of the main formation, creating what looks like a dual carriageway. Some of the blocks are enormous, estimated to weigh several tons, and are stacked in two distinct layers, with smaller pillar-like stones discovered underneath the larger, visible blocks. This multi-level construction is not typical of naturally fractured beach-rock, which usually lies in a single, flat layer. Furthermore, core samples drilled from the blocks have been analyzed, and some researchers claim the composition and cementation of the stone are inconsistent with the surrounding native beach-rock, suggesting the blocks may have been quarried from a different location and transported to the site. The debate was intensified by the discovery of other anomalous artifacts in the immediate vicinity. Divers have reported finding what appear to be massive stone anchors with drilled holes, similar to those used by ancient Mediterranean mariners, as well as strange, patterned stones and what some describe as unidentifiable metal objects. While these ancillary finds are often dismissed as modern debris or misidentified natural objects, they contribute to the site's aura of mystery. If the road is a natural formation, why are there so many seemingly out-of-place artifacts surrounding it? The counter-argument is that the waters around Bimini have been a busy shipping lane for centuries, and such objects could easily be remnants from shipwrecks or discarded ballast. Dating the formation has also proven to be a complex and contentious endeavor. Radiocarbon dating of the carbonate cement binding the stones has yielded ages around 3,000 to 4,000 years old. To mainstream science, this firmly places its formation in a natural geological timeframe, long after any hypothetical advanced Atlantean civilization would have existed. However, critics of this dating method argue that the cement being tested is simply the most recent layer to form. The original blocks themselves could be far older, and the dating only reveals when they were most recently submerged. They suggest that the formation could be the remnant of a structure built on dry land during the last ice age, when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower and only flooded as the glaciers melted. This would make it thousands of years older than the current radiocarbon dates suggest, potentially placing it in a timeline that could align with Plato's narrative. The Bimini Road controversy is a perfect microcosm of the entire Atlantis search. It represents the constant, often frustrating, tension between mainstream scientific skepticism and the passionate interpretation of alternative researchers. It is a Rorschach test on the ocean floor. To a geologist, it is a beautiful and entirely explainable natural feature. To an Atlantis enthusiast, it is a ruined pier, a toppled wall, or a flooded foundation, a silent sentinel from a forgotten age. Its true significance may lie not in providing a definitive answer, but in its power to inspire. It forces us to look more closely at the world beneath the waves, to question our assumptions about the capabilities of ancient peoples, and to remember that our planet's history is written not only in books but also in stone, even when that stone is hidden under the clear, blue water of the Bahamas. This thread of investigation leads us from the seafloor to the archives, to a different kind of evidence that is equally baffling. We now turn from what lies beneath the waves to what was drawn on parchment, to a series of ancient maps that defy conventional history. These are not simple navigational charts. They are cartographic puzzles that appear to show our world with an impossible accuracy, depicting continents in ways that should have been utterly unknown to the civilization that created them. The most famous and controversial of these is the Piri Reis map of 1513. Drawn by an Ottoman admiral using a collage of far older source maps, this map doesn't just show the coastlines of Europe and Africa. It also includes a detailed rendering of the eastern coast of South America with startling precision, but the true mystery lies at its southern edge. There, a landmass is depicted connected to South America yet clearly separate, with unusual features that have sparked debate for decades. Many researchers, including renowned cartographers like Arlington Mallory, have argued that this southern continent bears a shocking resemblance to the subglacial topography of Queen Maud Land, Antarctica, a coastline that has been buried under a mile of ice for thousands of years. The map shows rivers, mountains, and what appear to be ice-free bays, a portrait of a continent that has not been in that state since at least 4000 BC, long before any known civilization capable of such precise mapping could have existed. The Piri Reis map is not alone in its mystery. The Orontius Phineus world map of 1531 provides an even more detailed and compelling view of Antarctica. This map presents the southern continent not as a vague, conjectural landmass, but as a well-defined and surprisingly accurate shape, complete with fjords, mountain ranges, and rivers. Most astonishingly, it shows Antarctica without its thick ice cap, depicting a habitable coastline that aligns remarkably well with modern seismic surveys of the land beneath the ice. The Philippe Buach map of 1737, created by the French geographer to the king, offers another tantalizing clue. It shows Antarctica as two distinct landmasses separated by a wide water channel. For centuries, this was dismissed as a cartographic error, as the continent was assumed to be a single landmass. However, modern studies using ice-penetrating radar have confirmed that Antarctica is in fact an archipelago of large islands buried under the glacial weight, just as the Buach map suggests. The correlation is so precise that it defies simple coincidence, suggesting the mapmaker had access to geographical knowledge that was lost for centuries. The implications of these maps are staggering. They suggest that a highly advanced seafaring civilization existed in the deep past, one with the knowledge and technology to undertake a comprehensive mapping of the entire globe, including the coast of Antarctica during an ice-free period. This civilization would have needed to understand spherical trigonometry to accurately project the curved Earth onto a flat surface, a mathematical skill that wasn't formally developed until centuries later. Their cartographers would have required a fleet of ships capable of long-distance ocean voyages and sophisticated instruments for celestial navigation. Proponents of this theory argue that these ancient mariners are the true source behind many of our world's flood myths and legends of lost continents. Their knowledge, fragmented and copied by later cultures like the Greeks, Phoenicians, and medieval Europeans, would have been preserved in great libraries like Alexandria, only to be lost and rediscovered in bits and pieces by explorers during the Age of Discovery. In this light, maps like Piri Reis are not original works but palimpsests' medieval copies of copies, tracing a lineage back to a forgotten source civilization that truly knew the world. Naturally, mainstream scholarship offers alternative interpretations that are far less sensational but equally fascinating. Skeptics argue that the southern landmass on the Piri Reis map is not Antarctica at all, but a distorted and speculative amalgamation of the southern coast of South America, perhaps combined with rumors of a great southern land reported by early explorers. The apparent accuracy, they say, is a matter of selective interpretation and wishful thinking, where random lines are forced to match modern coastlines while ignoring the many obvious errors and mythological creatures that also adorn the map. The ice-free Antarctica on the Orontius Phineus map could be explained as a lucky guess or a theoretical exercise in symmetry, as Renaissance cartographers often filled the unknown southern oceans with a large, hypothetical continent to balance the landmasses of the north. The Buach map's split continent might be based on misread reports of iceberg-filled channels or the discovery of the strait between Tierra del Fuego and Antarctica, rather than knowledge of the subglacial topography. The debate ultimately hinges on a fundamental question: are we looking at preserved knowledge or profound speculation? The maps exist and their anomalies are real. The choice is between accepting that ancient explorers possessed a lost geography that somehow survived for millennia in fragmented form, or believing that a series of brilliant, lucky guesses by medieval and Renaissance cartographers accidentally predicted the true shape of a continent they could never have seen. Both possibilities challenge our understanding of history. One suggests a forgotten chapter of human achievement, while the other highlights the incredible, intuitive power of the human mind to piece together a world from fragments of myth, rumor, and observation. These maps stand as silent, enigmatic witnesses, their lines on parchment echoing the very same question posed by the stones on the ocean floor. Is our history far deeper and more mysterious than our textbooks have ever allowed us to believe? This incredible persistence of flood stories across the globe is no mere coincidence. It points to a profound and shared human experience, a collective memory of catastrophe written into the very bedrock of our oldest cultures. From the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, where the gods decide to wipe out humanity with a great deluge, to the Hindu scriptures that tell of Manu, saved by a giant fish from a world-destroying flood, the narrative is eerily consistent. The ancient Greeks had the story of Deucalion and Pyrrha, who survived a Zeus-sent flood to repopulate the earth. Indigenous cultures in the Americas, from the Hopi to the Maya, have their own powerful deluge myths. This universal theme suggests that these are not just imaginative fables, but distant, distorted echoes of real, traumatic events that affected our ancestors on a massive scale. The mechanism for preserving these memories across hundreds of generations is oral tradition. Before writing, this was humanity's living library, a sophisticated and resilient system of passing down knowledge, history, and lore through stories, songs, and poems. These narratives were not told verbatim like a modern history book. They were living, breathing entities. With each retelling, a skilled storyteller would adapt the tale, emphasizing certain elements to make a moral point, incorporating local details to make it resonate with a new audience, or magnifying the spectacle to maintain its power and wonder. A historical event like a devastating local flood could over centuries be transformed into the story of a world-ending deluge. The name of a drowned village could become the name of a lost kingdom. The scale and the symbolism would grow, but the core truth of a catastrophic loss would remain intact, preserved like a fossil within the layers of the story. This is precisely how a real event like the slow drowning of Doggerland or the apocalyptic eruption of Thera could have evolved into the legend of Atlantis. Imagine the survivors of the Storegga Slide tsunami fleeing the vanished plains of the North Sea. Their terrifying account of the sea violently reclaiming the land would have been their most important story, a warning and a memory for their children. As those descendants migrated and mixed with other groups, the story would travel. In the trading hubs of the ancient world, a Greek merchant might hear a fragmented version from a Scandinavian amber trader, a tale of a great land in the north that was swallowed by the waves. Over time, its location might shift. Its culture might adopt the features of more familiar advanced societies like the Minoans, and its destruction would become more singular and dramatic with each retelling. The same process applies to Thera. The eruption was an event of such unimaginable violence that it would have been seared into the collective consciousness of the entire Eastern Mediterranean. The Minoan traders based on Crete would have been among the first and most affected. Refugees carrying their distinct art, their advanced technology, and their terrifying stories would have fled to the coasts of Greece, Egypt, and Anatolia. In Egypt, a civilization obsessed with recording history, priests might have documented the arrival of these refugees and the strange environmental calamity that preceded it, the weeks of darkened skies, the failed harvests, the strange tides. This official record, combined with the harrowing oral accounts of the survivors, could have been the very source that Solon accessed 1,000 years later. The Egyptian priests, as Plato recounts, would have been the custodians of this ancient record, a story the Greeks themselves had forgotten. By the time this multi-generational game of telephone reached Plato in 4th century Athens, the story had been filtered through countless cultures and languages. The precise details of location and time would have been blurred, but the essential core, the memory of a brilliant, advanced civilization, brought low by its own hubris and destroyed in a single, catastrophic day and night by earthquake and flood, remained powerfully intact. Plato, a philosopher, would then have taken this already embellished legend and refined it further, shaping its details to serve his own moral and political arguments about the ideal state. The incredible rings, the war with ancient Athens, the specific metals, these could be his own artistic additions layered onto a prehistoric kernel of truth. The legend of Atlantis, therefore, may not be a pure historical account, but it is likely not a pure invention either. It stands as a monumental testament to the power of oral tradition, a shimmering mirage built upon the foundation of a real and terrifying historical event that our ancestors refused to forget. To truly appreciate the scale of the transformation our planet underwent, we must journey back to the end of the last ice age, a period of profound climatic upheaval that reshaped the entire world. For over 100,000 years, colossal ice sheets, some more than 2 miles thick, had blanketed much of North America, Northern Europe, and Asia. This frozen water was locked away on land, causing global sea levels to be dramatically lower than they are today by an almost unimaginable 400 feet. This exposed a vast amount of continental shelf that is now deep underwater, creating land bridges like the one connecting Asia to North America and vast coastal plains that were once thriving ecosystems and potential homelands for early human societies. Then, beginning around 19,000 years ago, the world began to warm. The great glaciers started their long, slow retreat, melting and calving icebergs into the rising oceans. This wasn't a smooth, gentle process. It was a fitful and often violent transformation of the global coastline, a relentless invasion of the sea that would have been terrifyingly visible within a single human lifetime. We often think of climate change as a modern phenomenon, but for our prehistoric ancestors, it was a tangible, relentless force that dictated their survival. The meltwater pulses from the collapsing ice sheets could cause sea levels to rise at rates that are staggering to consider. At the peak of this transgression, around 14,000 years ago, scientists believed the oceans were rising at a rate of more than 4 feet per century. To put that in perspective, that is more than 10 times the current rate of sea level rise we are experiencing today. Imagine being part of a tribe living on a fertile coastal plain. Over the course of your life, you wouldn't just notice the water creeping closer, you would witness your world actively shrinking. The bay where your father taught you to fish would become an open channel. The forest where you hunted would slowly turn into a salt marsh, then a lagoon, and then vanish entirely beneath the waves. Your community would be forced to abandon your settlement not once, but again and again, retreating inland as the sea pursued you with a patient, inexorable hunger. The psychological impact of this would be profound, creating a deep-seated cultural memory of loss and a potent fear of the ocean's power. This process didn't just drown empty beaches, it submerged a significant portion of the territory that was most attractive to early human settlement. Coastal regions have always been ecological hotspots, rich in marine resources, fertile soil, and mild climates. As humans spread across the globe after the Ice Age, these low-lying plains and river deltas would have been prime real estate. The North Sea, for instance, was not a sea at all, but a rich lowland called Doggerland, teeming with game and supporting a population of Mesolithic hunters. The Persian Gulf was a fertile river valley watered by the Tigris and Euphrates before it was flooded around 8,000 years ago. The coastlines of India, Southeast Asia, and Australia all extended miles beyond their current limits, creating vast, now drowned landscapes. Any sophisticated culture that developed in these vulnerable zones would have had its entire existence erased by the rising waters, its villages, fishing grounds, and sacred sites lost to the depths with barely a trace. This global phenomenon provides the most plausible scientific foundation for the Atlantis narrative and countless other flood myths. We don't need to invoke a single catastrophic event to explain the legend. The constant worldwide trauma of coastal inundation offers a more than sufficient catalyst. The story of a great culture lost to the sea could have emerged independently in dozens of different regions, each one reflecting the local experience of a universal catastrophe. Over generations, as these stories were passed down and embellished, the memory of a slow retreat could have been compressed into the more dramatic and moralistic tale of a proud empire punished by the gods in a single day and night. The specific details of Atlantis, its grandeur, its circular harbors, its advanced technology, could be a magnificent crystallization of these many memories, an archetype of every lost coastal homeland that ever existed. When we search for Atlantis today, we are not necessarily looking for a single continental-sized landmass that sank. We are likely searching for the ghost of 1,000 different settlements, the collective memory of our species' long retreat from the rising waters. The evidence we seek may not be a grand capital city with rings of canals, but the subtle signatures of human occupation on these drowned landscapes, the stone tools scattered on the North Sea floor, the submerged freshwater springs that once served as watering holes off the coast of India, or the enigmatic structures like the Bimini Road that could be the last remnants of a village built on then exposed section of the Bahama Banks. The story of post-glacial sea level rise reframes the entire quest. It suggests that Plato's Atlantis is not a historical report to be verified, but a profound cultural echo of a very real and devastating chapter in human history, a time when the world we knew literally vanished beneath the waves, leaving behind only stories and a deep, lingering sense that a part of our past is forever out of reach, waiting beneath the quiet sea. But what if the proof of a lost seafaring culture isn't just buried in the mud or etched on ancient maps, but is instead written into our very DNA and echoed in the words we speak? This leads us to a fascinating and often overlooked line of inquiry: the genetic and linguistic clues that might point to a forgotten hub of civilization. While we can't sequence the genome of an Atlantean, we can trace the incredible journeys of our own ancestors through modern genetic studies, and some of these migratory patterns reveal startling anomalies that hint at a much more interconnected ancient world than we once believed. Take, for example, the perplexing story of the sweet potato. This staple crop was domesticated in South America thousands of years ago, yet when European explorers first reached Polynesia, they found the sweet potato, known by its Quechua name Kumara, already thriving across the islands. For the longest time, this was written off as a mystery. How could a plant from one side of the Pacific Ocean wind up on the other long before Columbus? The prevailing theory now suggests that Polynesian voyagers, masters of wayfinding who settled islands from Hawaii to New Zealand, somehow made contact with the western coast of South America and brought the precious tuber back with them. This single botanical clue is a testament to the incredible distances ancient mariners could cover, challenging the notion that the Atlantic, a much narrower ocean, was an insurmountable barrier. Genetic evidence adds another layer to this puzzle. Studies of mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down through the maternal line, have revealed unexpected connections between populations separated by vast oceans. Certain haplogroups, which are genetic populations that share a common ancestor, show up in seemingly isolated places. For instance, some research has indicated a potential, though controversial, genetic link between certain Native American tribes and populations in Western Europe, a connection that predates Columbus by millennia. While these findings are hotly debated and require much more evidence, they open the door to a tantalizing possibility: that transoceanic voyages happened not just as rare, accidental events, but perhaps with a frequency that allowed for a genuine, though limited, exchange of people, ideas, and genes. Linguistics provides a parallel path of investigation. Language families are like great evolutionary trees, showing how tongues diverged from a common ancestral root as populations migrated and became isolated. Scholars meticulously reconstruct these proto-languages, the theoretical common ancestors of related tongues. But what linguists sometimes find are what they call aerial features, strange similarities in grammar, syntax, or vocabulary between languages that have no established historical connection and are oceans apart. These could be dismissed as coincidence, but when multiple unrelated languages share a complex and specific structural feature, it raises eyebrows. It suggests the possibility of a very old, very deep cultural contact that has since been lost to history, the linguistic equivalent of a fossil that doesn't fit the established geological layer. Of course, we must approach this evidence with a healthy dose of scientific caution. Genetic studies can be misinterpreted, and a shared haplogroup might point to a much older, common Asian ancestor rather than a direct Atlantic crossing. Linguistic similarities can often be explained by independent invention or the limitations of our own understanding of language development. The overwhelming consensus is that the Americas were populated via the Bering Land Bridge and that the development of its great civilizations was largely independent. These anomalous clues are the outliers, the data points that don't neatly fit the model. They are not proof of Atlantis, but they are proof that our models of the ancient past are still incomplete. Perhaps the most significant contribution of this genetic and linguistic detective work is that it forces us to radically reconsider the capabilities of prehistoric peoples. We have long imagined our ancestors as primitive, land-bound tribes, slowly expanding across continents, but the evidence from the settlement of the remote Pacific to these faint genetic whispers paints a different picture. It suggests that the urge to explore the open ocean is deeply human and far older than we thought. It's not a huge leap to imagine that a particularly advanced and motivated seafaring culture, based on an island or a coastal plain that now lies underwater, could have served as an intermediary, a forgotten hub that facilitated connections between the continents. Their legacy might not be a sunken city of gold, but a subtle, almost invisible signature in our genes and our languages, a ghost in the machine of human history waiting for us to finally learn how to read its code. Yet for all these compelling theories and tantalizing clues, we must now turn to the overwhelming consensus within the academic world, which presents a formidable and deeply reasoned counterargument. The prevailing view among historians and classicists is that Atlantis was never intended to be understood as a historical place. Instead, they argue, it is a powerful philosophical allegory, a brilliant thought experiment crafted by Plato to serve his larger moral and political purposes. This perspective doesn't diminish the story's significance, it simply shifts its importance from the realm of archaeology to the realm of ideas. Plato, a student of Socrates and the founder of the Academy in Athens, was primarily concerned with ethics, governance, and the nature of a just society. His entire body of work, from the Republic to the Laws, is dedicated to exploring these themes through dialogue and metaphor. In this context, the story of Atlantis becomes a perfect vehicle for his message, a cautionary tale about the inherent dangers of imperial ambition, material wealth, and spiritual decay. Scholars point to the very structure of the dialogues as a key piece of evidence. The story of Atlantis is presented in two works, the Timaeus and the Critias, which are part of a planned trilogy that was never completed. In the Timaeus, the tale is introduced not as a discovered history, but as a potentially true story that illustrates the ideals discussed in the Republic. The character Critias claims it is a history passed down through his family from the Athenian lawgiver Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests. However, no other known Egyptian records or any contemporary Greek writings mention Atlantis or such a cataclysm. This singular source, embedded within a philosophical work, is highly suspect to historians, as the renowned classicist Professor Julia Annas of the University of Arizona has argued. Expecting to find Atlantis is like reading George Orwell's Animal Farm and expecting to find the actual farm. It misunderstands the entire genre. The story functions as a myth, and for the ancient Greeks, myths were not falsehoods but vehicles for expressing deeper truths about the human condition and the cosmos. The central purpose of this myth, according to academic analysis, is to provide a stark contrast to Plato's vision of the ideal state, which is represented by ancient Athens in the story. In the Critias, the prehistoric Athenians are everything the Atlanteans are not. They are virtuous, modest, living in harmony with the laws of the gods, and dedicated to the common good rather than individual wealth. They are the philosophical ideal made manifest. Atlantis, on the other hand, represents the antithesis of this, a society that begins with divine favor but becomes corrupted by its own power and luxury. Their attempt to conquer the Mediterranean is the ultimate act of hubris, and their destruction by the gods is a direct consequence of their moral failure. This narrative serves as a powerful warning to Plato's fellow Athenians, who were themselves engaged in imperial overreach and had recently suffered a catastrophic defeat in the Peloponnesian War. The story says, in effect, this is what happens when a society abandons justice for greed and power. Even the greatest empire can be obliterated in a day. Furthermore, historians emphasize that if a civilization as advanced and powerful as Atlantis had truly existed, we would expect to find some trace of it in the records of other contemporary cultures. The ancient Egyptians, meticulous record keepers, have no account of a war with a vast Atlantic empire or of conveying such a history to Solon. The Phoenicians, the greatest sailors of the ancient world, left no tales of a sunken continent blocking the Atlantic routes. The archaeological record, for all its surprises, has yielded no evidence of a transatlantic exchange of goods, technologies, or ideas that would be expected from a civilization acting as a bridge between continents during the proposed time period. The absence of evidence is not just a gap, it is a deafening silence that stretches across multiple disciplines. For every anomalous underwater formation that might suggest human hands, there are countless geological explanations. For every flood myth, there are local, verifiable causes like the filling of the Black Sea Basin or river floods in Mesopotamia. The academic stance is that layering a literal interpretation onto Plato's rich allegory is to miss its profound philosophical point. Atlantis isn't lost beneath the sea. It was never there to begin with, except as one of the most enduring and powerful ideas ever conceived. But this entire debate hinges on a crucial variable that has long been a source of frustration for archaeologists: time. The precise chronology of ancient events is the bedrock upon which we build our understanding of history, and for decades the timeline of the Thera eruption and the Minoan collapse has been a shifting, uncertain foundation. The traditional dating, based on pottery styles and Egyptian chronology, placed the cataclysm around 1500 BCE. This created a significant gap with Plato's timeline, which, if taken literally, points to a destruction around 9600 BC. This massive discrepancy has been the single greatest weapon in the skeptics' arsenal, used to completely dismiss any possible link between the Minoans and the legend of Atlantis. However, the field of archaeology is undergoing a quiet revolution, one driven not by shovels but by particle accelerators and lasers. Advanced dating techniques are now peeling back the layers of time with unprecedented precision, and the new picture they are revealing is forcing a dramatic reevaluation of everything we thought we knew. Radiocarbon dating has been a workhorse of archaeology since the 1950s, but its modern incarnation is a world apart from its predecessor. The principle remains the same: all living things absorb carbon-14, a radioactive isotope from the atmosphere. When an organism dies, this absorption stops and the carbon-14 begins to decay at a known rate. By measuring the remaining amount in an ancient sample, a piece of wood, a seed, an animal bone, scientists can calculate how long ago that organism died. The revolution has come in the form of accelerator mass spectrometry, or EMS. This technology doesn't just count the decay events, it directly counts the individual atoms of carbon-14 in a sample. This allows scientists to use incredibly tiny fragments of material, like a single olive seed found buried in the volcanic ash at Akrotiri, and achieve a margin of error of just a few decades, a level of precision that was once unimaginable. When researchers applied this state-of-the-art MS dating to samples from Thera, the results sent shockwaves through the academic community. The new data consistently pointed to a much earlier date for the eruption, centering around 1600 BC. This might seem like a small adjustment, but it represents a shift of a full century, a difference that completely recalibrates our understanding of the Bronze Age world. This new date pushes the eruption firmly into the heyday of the Minoan civilization's power, not during its later potential decline. It means the cataclysm didn't finish off a weakened society. It struck a thriving, sophisticated empire at its absolute peak, making its utter devastation all the more profound and catastrophic. This new timeline also better aligns with ice core records from Greenland and tree ring chronologies from Ireland and North America. which all show a pronounced global climatic signature of a massive volcanic event around that same 17th century BC window. Beyond radiocarbon, other techniques are adding further layers of confirmation. Thermoluminescence dating, which measures the accumulated radiation energy in pottery or fired bricks since they were last heated, is being used to date the Minoan structures themselves. Potassium-argon dating, ideal for much older volcanic rock, helps geologists pin down the formation history of the island. Each independent method acts as a cross-check on the others, creating a robust and convergent timeline that is increasingly difficult to dispute. The collective weight of this scientific evidence is building a powerful case for a 16th century BC event of world-altering proportions. So, what does this chronological fine-tuning mean for the Atlantis narrative? On one hand, it does nothing to reconcile the date with Plato's specific 9600 BC figure. The eruption is still a millennia-old memory by the time Solon visits Egypt, not an event from the deep antediluvian past. In this strictest sense, the new dating does not make Thera a perfect match for a literal reading of Plato's timeline. However, it dramatically strengthens the case for Thera as the most likely inspiration for the legend. By moving the eruption earlier, we are now looking at a cataclysm that occurred even deeper in the past from Plato's perspective. A story passed down for 1200 years is far more likely to become mythologized and distorted than one passed down for just 900. The magnitude of the event, now firmly established as occurring at the height of Minoan power, makes it a far more credible candidate for generating a legend of a lost advanced civilization. The destruction wasn't just of a colony, it was the decapitation of a thalassocracy, an event so traumatic that its echo could easily have grown in the telling over the centuries. Its chronology stretched into a more mythical, ancient past to emphasize its moral lesson about divine punishment. The new dating doesn't prove Atlantis was real, but it makes the story of its potential real-world inspiration more compelling and coherent than ever before. This technological revolution begins not with divers, but with sleek, torpedo-like machines gliding silently through the abyss. Autonomous underwater vehicles, or OVE, are the new pioneers of the deep. Unlike remotely operated vehicles that are tethered to a ship and require constant human guidance, these robotic explorers are programmed with a mission and then set free, capable of covering vast, grid-like swaths of the ocean floor for days on end. They are the underwater equivalent of satellite mappers, armed with multi-beam sonar that paints the seafloor in breathtaking high-resolution detail. They can identify anomalies as small as a single amphora protruding from the sediment across thousands of square miles, something that would have taken a team of human divers a lifetime to survey. This shift from targeted, hypothesis-driven dives to systematic, unbiased mapping is fundamental. We are no longer just testing theories about where Atlantis might be, but are instead creating the first true charts of our own planet's final frontier, allowing the landscape itself to reveal its secrets. Alongside these independent scouts, a new generation of remotely operated vehicles provides the surgeon's hands to the AUV's keen eyes. Modern ROVs are technological marvels, connected to their mothership by a fiber optic tether thinner than a garden hose, yet capable of transmitting massive amounts of data and high-definition video in real time. They are equipped with powerful lights, robotic arms capable of gently retrieving a delicate artifact, and an array of sensors that can analyze the chemical composition of water seeping from a wreck or detect subtle magnetic anomalies. Where an AUV finds a potential target, an ROV is sent down to investigate, providing archaeologists with a live feed from 3,000 meters below. The pilot, sitting in a comfortable control room on the surface, can manipulate the vehicle's tools with incredible precision, allowing for non-invasive examination and recovery of objects without a single person ever braving the crushing pressures of the deep. This synergy between the wide-area reconnaissance of AUVs and the pinpoint inspection of ROVs has created a powerful one-two punch for underwater exploration. Perhaps the most visually stunning advancement is the rise of photogrammetry, a technique that transforms simple photographs into intricate, measurable 3D models. The process is deceptively simple. An ROV or diver takes thousands of overlapping high-resolution photographs of a site from every possible angle. Powerful computer algorithms then analyze these images, identifying common points and stitching them together into a precise digital twin. The result is nothing short of magical. Researchers can now explore a complete shipwreck or a submerged ruin on their computer screens, rotating it, taking measurements between stones with pixel-perfect accuracy, and even digitally peeling back layers of sediment. This technology has revolutionized the analysis of sites like the Bimini Road or the Yonaguni Monument. Instead of relying on ambiguous, single-angle photographs, scientists can now study these formations in full 3 dimensions, examining the geometry of each block, the way they fit together, and the nature of the surrounding geology with a clarity that was previously impossible. It allows for virtual preservation and global collaboration, turning a single dive's footage into a permanent, shareable record. These tools are not just theoretical, they are already being deployed on ambitious expeditions that read like something from a science fiction novel. The Ocean Explorer Organization, for instance, has conducted extensive surveys around the Azores Plateau using AUVs, mapping the massive underwater flanks of the islands and revealing ancient beach lines and river channels now hundreds of meters beneath the surface. Their work provides the hard data to test the hypothesis that this region was a large, interconnected island during the last ice age. Similarly, advanced ROVs have been used to investigate the mysterious underwater structures off the coast of Pantelleria, with live-streamed dives allowing the world to watch as the robots navigated through what appeared to be collapsed walls and man-made canals. While many of these investigations ultimately conclude that the formations are geological, the process itself is a triumph. Each expedition, whether it finds proof or a dead end, adds another layer of data to our collective understanding, systematically narrowing the search and replacing speculation with evidence. This methodical approach is crucial, for it tempers excitement with scientific rigor. The same technology that reveals breathtaking anomalies also often provides the key to debunking them. The detailed 3D models of the Bimini Road, for example, have allowed geologists to demonstrate how the blocks exhibit classic fracturing patterns of beach rock, showing the same erosion on their tops and bottoms. The high-resolution sonar maps of the so-called Azores Pyramid clearly show its structure is part of a larger volcanic ridge, its symmetry a product of tectonic forces rather than intelligent design. This is the true power of the technological leap. It cuts both ways. It allows us to find the needle in the haystack, but it also gives us the tools to determine if that needle is truly a precious artifact or just a sliver of rusted metal. This process is slowly moving the search for Atlantis from the fringes of pseudo-archaeology into the credible, data-driven world of maritime science, where every claim is scrutinized not by opinion, but by petabytes of undeniable digital information. Today, the legend of Atlantis has been reborn in a form Plato could never have imagined, not as a philosophical warning, but as a global commercial powerhouse. It's a name that sells, a brand that instantly evokes mystery and adventure, plastered across everything from blockbuster movie marquees to themed hotel resorts in the Bahamas. This explosion into popular culture began in earnest with George Pal's 1961 film, Atlantis, the Lost Continent, which painted a picture of futuristic technology and Greek-style togas, blending Plato's descriptions with a heavy dose of Hollywood spectacle. This template was perfected by Disney's 2001 animated film, which introduced a new generation to a shimmering, bubble-domed city powered by crystals, cementing a very specific and visually stunning image in the public consciousness. Video games like the Tomb Raider series and Assassin's Creed Odyssey have sent players on interactive quests to discover the city's secrets, while countless novels and comic books have used it as a backdrop for epic tales of heroism and cataclysm. This widespread embrace has made Atlantis a household name, but it has also wrapped the core historical mystery in layers of pure fantasy, making it increasingly difficult to distinguish the legitimate archaeological question from entertaining fiction. The commercial engine extends far beyond screens and pages into the very landscape of tourism. On the island of Santorini, tour guides confidently point to the massive volcanic caldera and describe it as the inspiration for Atlantis, a claim that, while academically debated, provides a powerful narrative draw for visitors. In the Bahamas, glass-bottom boat tours ferry tourists over the Bimini Road, presenting the formation as a definitive road to the Lost City. The Atlantis Paradise Island Resort on Nassau is perhaps the most blatant example, a colossal aquatic-themed casino and hotel complex complete with replica Babylonian towers and water slides named after Poseidon. These attractions are built for fun and profit, not historical accuracy, and they create a feedback loop where the public's understanding of Atlantis becomes shaped by these commercial interpretations. The real, complex debate between geologists and archaeologists is often reduced to a simple, marketable soundbite. This could be it. This sensationalized approach prioritizes excitement over evidence, satisfying a deep public craving for the mystery, but often doing so at the expense of genuine scientific inquiry. This saturation of pop culture mythology creates a significant challenge for researchers and academics devoted to studying ancient cataclysms and potential historical kernels of the story. Every time a serious scientific publication explores a new geological finding or a submerged archaeological site, it must now compete with a cacophony of exaggerated headlines and clickbait articles from less scrupulous outlets. A sonar anomaly is instantly branded as a sunken pyramid. A curious geological formation becomes proof of Atlantis, and a nuanced theory about ancient trade routes is twisted into a revelation about a global super-civilization. This media frenzy makes it extraordinarily difficult for the public, who are eager to learn, to separate credible, peer-reviewed science from pure speculation. Well-meaning enthusiasts inspired by a documentary or a book often dive into online forums armed with misinformation, passionately defending ideas that mainstream science has long since debunked. This places scientists in a frustrating position. To address these claims, they must first waste valuable time and energy dismantling myths before they can even begin to discuss their actual, carefully gathered data, a process that can make them seem overly dismissive or closed-minded to outsiders. The result is a widening rift between two very different worlds: the world of academic archaeology, which operates on strict methodologies, peer review, and a cautious interpretation of evidence, and the world of alternative history, which is often driven by passion, intuition, and a desire for revolutionary discovery. This divide is not merely ideological, it has real-world consequences for funding and public support. Granting agencies may be hesitant to fund research related to Atlantis for fear of being associated with fringe theories, starving legitimate projects of the resources they need. Conversely, sensational claims can attract massive crowdfunding from a hopeful public, directing money and attention toward expeditions that may lack scientific rigor. This environment forces a difficult balancing act upon credible researchers. How do you engage a public that is deeply fascinated by a topic without compromising your scientific integrity? How do you share exciting possibilities without feeding the sensationalist machine? Many choose to avoid the term Atlantis altogether, opting for more precise language like the study of Holocene sea level rise and its impact on prehistoric coastal settlements, or the investigation of the Minoan eruption sequence. While accurate, this technical language struggles to capture the public's imagination in the same way, creating a communication gap that pop culture is all too happy to fill. Yet within this complicated landscape, there is a surprising and potent upside. the very same commercial and cultural machine that obscures the science also serves as its greatest amplifier. The enduring, widespread fascination with Atlantis, however misinformed it may sometimes be, generates a massive and sustained public interest in archaeology, geology, and ancient history. A child who watches a cartoon movie about Atlantis might be inspired to pick up a book about the Minoans or volcanic eruptions. A tourist who visits a site like Santorini or the Bimini Road might come away with a genuine curiosity to learn more about the real science behind the legend. This popular appeal ensures that these fields remain in the public eye, creating a broader base of support for all forms of historical and scientific exploration. The challenge, then, is not to dismiss this popular fascination, but to harness it. The goal for educators and scientists is to meet the public where they are, to acknowledge the allure of the mystery while gently guiding the conversation toward critical thinking, evidence-based reasoning, and the genuine, albeit often less dramatic, wonders that archaeology continues to uncover. The story of Atlantis, in the end, is a testament to the enduring power of a great story. The task ahead is to ensure that the next chapter is written not by Hollywood producers, but by the patient, meticulous work of discovery that continues to illuminate the true depths of our ancient past. So if Plato's story wasn't purely his own invention, where could it have come from? He provides what seems like a very specific and credible source, the Athenian statesman Solon, who allegedly heard the tale from Egyptian priests in the city of Sais during his travels around 590 BC. According to Plato, these priests chided Solon and the Greeks for having forgotten their own ancient history, preserving instead the memory of a great antagonist power that was destroyed by a cataclysm 9,000 years before their time. This chain of transmission is crucial because it lends the story an air of historical authority. Solon was one of the most revered figures in Athenian history, the architect of their early legal system, and a man known for his wisdom and integrity. By tying the story to him, Plato wasn't just name-dropping, he was grounding his fantastical tale in a figure of unimpeachable credibility for his audience. But how plausible is this claimed Egyptian connection? Let's start with Solon's travels. Historical records confirm that after establishing his laws in Athens, Solon did indeed leave the city for a period of 10 years, partly to avoid being pressured into changing his new legal codes and partly, as the historian Herodotus tells us, to see the world. Egypt was a common destination for Greek intellectuals of the era, a beacon of ancient knowledge and splendor. The city of Sais, located in the Nile Delta, was a significant cultural and religious center, home to a grand temple dedicated to the goddess Neith, whom the Greeks associated with Athena. It is entirely feasible that Solon would have visited there and conversed with the learned priestly class. These priests were the guardians of Egypt's immense historical records, chronicling events on papyrus and temple walls that stretched back millennia further than any Greek history. The idea that they would possess knowledge of events unknown to the Greeks is not at all far-fetched. The real question is whether the Egyptian records actually contained a story matching the description of Atlantis. While no hieroglyphic text has ever been discovered that explicitly describes a large island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules that sank into the ocean, there are compelling parallels in Egyptian mythology that could have been interpreted or reshaped over time. The most significant is the pervasive theme of a primordial island that was the home of the gods and the site of creation itself. This place, known as the Isle of the Egg or the Mound of Creation, was said to have risen from the primordial waters of Nun at the beginning of time. While it was a spiritual and mythical concept rather than a physical location for the Egyptians, the idea of a sacred island arising from and eventually returning to the water is a powerful archetype. Furthermore, Egyptian history was punctuated by real, devastating events. The Thera eruption, for instance, would have had tangible effects in Egypt. Scientists have found minuscule particles of volcanic glass from Thera in the Nile Delta, and Egyptian records from the reign of Pharaoh Ahmose describe a period of strange, prolonged darkness, violent storms, and chaos phenomena that align eerily with the climatic effects of a massive volcanic explosion. A tale of a distant island kingdom obliterated by the sea could have easily been woven from these threads, blending a memory of a real catastrophe with their own ancient creation myths. The timeline, however, presents a fascinating puzzle. Plato is very specific. The priests told Solon the destruction occurred 9,000 years before their meeting, placing it around 9,600 BC. This is deep in the Paleolithic era, a time when human society was comprised of small, nomadic hunter-gatherer groups. There is no archaeological evidence anywhere on Earth for a complex, bronze-working maritime civilization existing at that date. This is the single biggest chronological obstacle to taking Plato's account literally. One compelling theory proposed by some scholars is that a simple translation error or cultural misunderstanding occurred. The Egyptian numeral system was different from the Greek, and their historical records often used symbolic rather than literal numbers. The Egyptian word for 100 and for 1,000 could be confused by a foreigner. If the original story referred to 900 years instead of 9,000, the timeline suddenly snaps into a startlingly plausible focus. 900 years before Solon's visit would place the destruction around 1500 BC, a date that aligns perfectly with the eruption of Thera and the collapse of the Minoan civilization. This elegant solution transforms an impossible prehistoric fable into a potential, if distorted, memory of a real historical event that the Egyptians, with their meticulous records, would have been in a unique position to preserve and later share with a visiting Greek sage. Whether through a mistake in translation, a symbolic interpretation of time, or a deliberate mythological elaboration, this recalibrated timeline makes the entire chain of transmission not only plausible but remarkably coherent. What if we've been searching for the wrong thing all along? The quest for Atlantis has often been framed as a binary choice. Either it was a real, single place waiting to be discovered, or it was a complete fiction invented by Plato. But this black and white thinking might be the very reason the mystery has endured for so long without a definitive solution. A far more compelling and nuanced possibility is emerging from the synthesis of all this evidence, that Atlantis was never one place but many. The story we know today could be a magnificent tapestry, a composite myth woven together from the threads of multiple catastrophic events that traumatized the ancient world, later masterfully stitched into a single, powerful allegory by one of history's greatest philosophers. Consider the raw materials Plato would have had to work with. By his time, in the 4th century BC, the Mediterranean world was already ancient, its collective memory filled with stories of great floods and fallen kingdoms. The eruption of Thera 4 centuries earlier was a cataclysm of such immense proportion that its echo would have reverberated through generations. Refugees from the Minoan world would have brought tales of a sophisticated island culture erased in a single, fiery day, of tsunamis that scoured coasts and of a sky that turned black. These stories would have traveled along trade routes to Egypt and beyond, growing in scale and grandeur with each telling. Simultaneously, the much older, deeper memory of post-glacial sea level rise was encoded in the folklore of virtually every coastal culture on Earth. The slow, inexorable drowning of fertile lands like Doggerland, a process that may have culminated in a sudden, tsunami-driven catastrophe, created a universal narrative of a lost world beneath the waves. And in Egypt, priests may have preserved their own records of a greener Sahara turning to dust, of river systems vanishing and forcing great migrations, adding the theme of a paradise lost to desertification. Plato, then, was not a historian poring over a single, accurate map. He was a philosopher and a storyteller, a gatherer of myths and a shaper of narratives. His genius was in his ability to synthesize. He could have taken the incredible architectural and cultural details from the Minoan stories, the bull symbolism, the advanced hydraulics, the naval power, and combined them with the overwhelming scale and antiquity from the flood myths. The precise, concentric description of the city could have been inspired by a real, natural formation like the Richat structure, a geographical oddity that might have been known to him through Egyptian sources who traded across the Sahara. The specific location beyond the Pillars of Hercules might have been a literary device, placing this exemplar of hubris outside the known Greek world, in the realm of the unknown and the divine. He wasn't recording a history, he was constructing the ultimate cautionary tale. This multi-source model elegantly resolves the greatest contradictions that have plagued every single theory approach. The geographical discrepancy, it vanishes if the location is allegorical, not literal. The impossible timeline of 9,000 years, it makes sense if it's a dramatic device to emphasize the story's ancient and mythic qualities, perhaps conflating the much older memory of climate change with a more recent volcanic event. The lack of a single sunken continent in the Atlantic, it's no longer necessary because the story isn't about one continent, but about the universal human experience of catastrophic loss. Plato took these disparate threads of truth, a volcanic eruption here, a flooded plain there, a dried-up river elsewhere, and wove them into a perfect story to serve his philosophical purpose, to warn against the corruption that comes from wealth and power, and to illustrate the fragility of even the greatest civilization in the face of divine displeasure. This perspective doesn't diminish the legend of Atlantis, it makes it infinitely richer. It is no longer a simple puzzle to be solved with a single discovery, but a profound reflection of humanity's deep past. The story is a cultural mirror reflecting real trauma, real wonder, and a very real fear of the forces that shape our world. The evidence we've explored isn't conflicting, it's complementary. Each piece, the ash on Thera, the bones in the North Sea, the stone tools in the Sahara, the sonar maps of the Azores, is a genuine clue. They just don't all point to the same spot on a map. Instead, they point to different chapters in a long and dramatic human history, chapters that a brilliant philosopher in Athens merged into one unforgettable narrative. Atlantis, therefore, is not lost. Its parts are all around us, buried in the geology of our planet and the folklore of our species, waiting for us to understand that the truth of the story is far more fascinating than the fiction of a single sunken city. Ultimately, the enduring power of the Atlantis myth lies not in its potential to be proven true, but in its profound resonance with the deepest currents of the human experience. This is far more than a simple story about a sunken city. It is a fundamental archetype that speaks to our collective consciousness. At its heart, Atlantis represents our timeless fascination with the concept of a lost golden age, a pristine era of wisdom and peace that somehow slipped through our fingers. This longing for a forgotten utopia is a universal theme found in the mythologies of countless cultures, from the Garden of Eden to the Sanskrit concept of lost continents. It embodies a nostalgic yearning for a time when humanity was supposedly more connected to the divine, more in harmony with nature, and more advanced in spirit. In a modern world often perceived as chaotic and fragmented, the idea that such perfection might have once existed and that its secrets could still be recovered offers a powerful sense of hope and a compelling direction for our imagination. This legend also serves as one of history's most potent and persistent cautionary tales, a stark reminder of the breathtaking fragility of even the most magnificent civilizations. Plato's narrative was explicitly designed as a warning against hubris, materialism, and the moral decay that can fester within a powerful society. The Atlanteans, in his account, were not conquered by an external enemy. They were destroyed from within by their own greed and arrogance, with nature itself serving as the instrument of their divine punishment. This theme echoes with chilling relevance today, as we grapple with the cascading consequences of climate change, environmental degradation, and the ethical dilemmas posed by our own rapidly accelerating technology, the story of Atlantis feels less like an ancient fable and more like a prescient allegory. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about our own trajectory. Are we, in our pursuit of progress, unknowingly engineering our own downfall? The myth holds up a mirror, challenging us to consider whether a society can truly advance technologically without a parallel evolution in wisdom and responsibility. Furthermore, the search for Atlantis is a magnificent testament to the unquenchable human spirit of exploration and discovery. It represents the drive to look beyond the horizon, to question accepted narratives, and to believe that the greatest mysteries are still waiting to be solved. This innate curiosity is the engine of science and the soul of archaeology. Every time a new technology like deep-sea sonar or satellite altimetry reveals a strange formation on the ocean floor, it reignites that spark of wonder. The possibility, however faint, that we might one day find tangible proof of a forgotten chapter in our history is an incredibly powerful motivator. It pushes us to develop better tools, to explore the most remote corners of our planet, and to continually refine our understanding of the past. In this sense, the quest itself is arguably more important than the destination. It keeps us questioning, learning, and exploring, ensuring that we never become complacent in our knowledge. Ultimately, the true location of Atlantis may be irrelevant. Its real home is not on any map, but within the shared architecture of our stories. It exists as a cultural touchstone, a narrative vessel into which we can pour our greatest hopes, our deepest fears, and our most profound questions about who we are and where we come from. Whether it was inspired by the eruption of Thera, the drowning of Doggerland, or the desiccation of the Sahara, the legend endures because it gives shape to a universal human experience, the memory of loss, the anxiety of catastrophe, and the dream of redemption. It is a story that acknowledges the terrifying power of nature while simultaneously celebrating the brilliance of human achievement. This powerful duality ensures that Atlantis will never truly be lost as it continues to captivate, inspire, and warn us, forever anchored in that mysterious space between our history and our imagination. So where does this incredible journey leave us? After sifting through the ash of Thera, mapping the drowned plains of Doggerland, and surveying the haunting rings of the Richat structure, we are left not with a single, definitive answer, but with a profound and transformative collection of possibilities. The most compelling new evidence doesn't point to one spot on the map, but to a revolutionary shift in our understanding of antiquity itself. From geology, we now have a terrifyingly detailed timeline of the Thera eruption, revealing it was not one blast but a cascading sequence of volcanic fury that aligns with Plato's single day and night of misfortune more closely than ever before. Advanced sonar and satellite altimetry have peeled back the ocean to reveal a lost world of sunken landscapes from the Azores plateau to the coasts of India, showing us that vast, habitable territories were indeed swallowed by rising seas at the end of the Ice Age. And from archaeology, the scattered stone tools around the Richat and the meticulously mapped ruins of Akrotiri provide tangible proof of sophisticated cultures that thrived in now vanished environments, only to be erased by cataclysmic change. This wealth of evidence leads us to a powerful and perhaps more satisfying conclusion than the discovery of any single ruin. The literal city of Atlantis may remain elusive, not because it didn't exist, but because it was never one place to begin with. The genius of Plato's story likely lies in its synthesis. It is a magnificent tapestry woven from the threads of multiple, real-world catastrophes that traumatized the ancient world. The memory of the Minoan collapse, the universal experience of coastal inundation, and perhaps even the desiccation of the Sahara. The search for a literal Atlantis has, in fact, been a spectacular success because it has forced us to uncover the incredible truths of our deep past. We have learned that our ancestors were far more advanced and interconnected than we ever imagined, that climate change and geological upheaval have shaped human destiny for millennia, and that the stories our ancestors told were not mere fictions, but encoded histories of survival and loss. The legend endures because it speaks to something fundamental within us, a fascination with lost worlds, a caution about the perils of hubris, and an unquenchable drive to explore the mysteries of our past. The quest for Atlantis has ultimately proven that the line between myth and history is far blurrier and far more fascinating than we once believed. We are left with a deeper appreciation for the power of storytelling to preserve truth across centuries, and a humbling recognition of the forces that have sculpted human civilization. So we turn the question over to you. Which of these theories resonates most deeply? Does the geological precision of the Thera eruption convince you, or does the eerie geographical match of the Richat structure feel more compelling? Perhaps the slow-motion tragedy of Doggerland's drowning or the high-tech maps of the Azores capture your imagination. Share your thoughts in the comments below. The conversation about our shared mysterious past is far from over.